strongest move you'll ever make is no move at all. Let that settle deep in your bones. Let it echo not in your mind, but in that quiet place behind the noise, where your truest self resides. Because the world will always tell you that you must do something, that silence is weakness, that if you don't react, you'll lose. But Stoicism teaches us the opposite. In stillness there is strength. In restraint there is revelation. In the refusal to react, you reclaim the power that was always yours. Right now you may be hurting. You may be sitting in the aftermath of a severed bond, wondering if you should block them, send one last message, explain yourself just one more time in the hope that they'll finally understand your worth. But let me ask you, what is power if not sovereignty over your own inner world? What is dignity if not the choice to walk away, silently, without spectacle, without begging to be seen? You think you're supposed to act, that by blocking them you'll send a message, that by explaining you'll be heard, that by pleading you'll be remembered. But those are all noisy forms of powerlessness. Real power is quiet. It moves like a shadow at dawn, felt, not seen. You don't win by forcing closure. You don't find peace in getting the last word. You win by becoming a mystery they can no longer solve, a presence they can no longer reach, a story they can no longer rewrite. Imagine this. You walk into a theater, the lights dim, the play begins, the characters rise and fall, tension builds, and just when you expect the climax, the lights cut out. The curtains close. No explanation, no resolution. You leave not with satisfaction, but with a question that lingers like smoke in your chest. That, my friends, is what they will feel when you simply do not play the game. So don't block them. Don't chase them. Don't explain yourself to those who made no effort to understand you the first time. The Stoics taught that what belongs to you cannot be taken, and what can be taken was never truly yours. From this moment on, you are not here to prove. You are here to evolve. Let your silence become the mirror they can't escape. Let your absence echo louder than any scream. And when they finally realize what they lost, you'll already be living a life too rich, too peaceful, too free for them to follow. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't just advice. It's liberation. It's not just how to walk away. It's how to never be dragged back again. Part 1. Let time work against them. You don't have to prove your absence. Time will speak for you. At first it won't look like they care. They'll carry on seemingly unaffected, laughing louder, hosting more, going out taking pictures with people you've never seen before. It'll look like they're thriving. You'll feel like the one who lost. You'll sit in your quiet, scrolling through their highlights, wondering how they moved on so fast, and why you still feel stuck in a story they've already rewritten. But here's what you must remember. What you're seeing is not peace, it's performance. Because the pain doesn't come when you leave. It comes after you don't return. It comes when the silence stretches on, and still no sign of you, no message, no reaction, not even a shadow in their notifications. That's when they start to wonder quietly, privately, where no one else can see it. Did I lose something I can never get back? And that wondering? That's where time begins to do its work. Not loudly, not all at once, but with gentle precision, like a tide pulling at the edges of a sandcastle. Because regret isn't immediate. It builds slowly. At first they'll distract themselves. New conversation, new people, new dopamine. It's easy to drown out the weight of silence. Temporarily. But one day the distractions won't work. One day they'll hear a song you both loved, or walk by a place where you once laughed like you'd never leave. And for a split second, something in their chest will ache, not because they miss you, but because they miss the version of themselves who was loved by you. That version is gone now, because love, when it's no longer accessible, becomes memory, and memories, when not honored in the present, become regret. And here's the most powerful part. You don't have to witness any of it. You don't have to see their sadness. You don't have to wait for their apology. You don't need them to post about missing you or reach out to validate your worth. You are not their observer anymore. You are not their mirror. You've exited the equation. And what remains is the quiet arithmetic of time, calculating all the ways they didn't show up for you when it mattered most. Let time do what your words could not, because time is patient. Time is honest. Time is relentless. It keeps showing up, even when they pretend not to feel it. It keeps knocking, even when they try to drown it out. And eventually it catches them, in the stillness, in the silence, in the space where you used to live. And when it does, when the realization finally hits, you'll already be long gone, not bitter, not angry, just beyond them. You will have grown in directions they can't follow, healed in ways they can't understand, evolved into someone who no longer checks to see if they've gotten it yet, because the moment you stop waiting for their realization, that's when you become unreachable, not blocked, not hidden, just unavailable by nature, not by strategy. And in that absence, they will feel it. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but time is patient, and time keeps score. So let them go. Let them think they've won. Let them walk away believing they didn't lose anything special. You don't have to convince them otherwise, because time will whisper to them what your silence has already said. You lost something rare, and it's never coming back. Say it with me now, not with sadness, but with quiet certainty. I trust time to do the work. I no longer need to witness their regret. I am not waiting. I am not chasing. I am moving forward, and I'm not looking back. Part 2. Stop begging, make them feel your absence. Begging doesn't come from love. It comes from forgetting where your worth truly lives. Let's be honest. You've sat there staring at your phone, drafting that one last message. Maybe if I say it this way, maybe if I explain it differently, maybe if I'm honest enough, raw enough, gentle enough, they'll finally see, finally understand, finally care. We've all been there. You believe that if you just find the right combination of words, the right tone, the right balance of pain and dignity, they will awaken. They'll feel what you feel. They'll rush back with the apology that never came. But let me say something with all the clarity I can offer you. If they were going to understand you, they would have done it when you were still speaking. If they were going to choose you, they wouldn't have put you in a position where you felt the need to plead. And if they truly saw your worth, you wouldn't be here wondering how to prove it. Begging, in all its forms, is not about love. It's not about connection. It's not even about hope. It's about fear. The fear that maybe you're not enough. The fear that if you go quiet, you'll disappear. The fear that your absence won't echo the way your presence never seemed to. But that fear isn't telling you the truth. It's just feeding the version of you that was trained to equate attention with value, affection with validation, presence with permanence. Here's the reality. People don't regret losing you when you beg. They regret losing you when they realize they can no longer reach you. When you stop replying, when you don't answer the hey, when you don't watch their stories, when you don't give them the emotional safety net of your reaction. That's when the discomfort begins, and that's when the real shift happens. You become unavailable, not in anger, not in coldness, but in peace. A peace that no longer needs to explain itself. A peace that no longer needs to ask, do I still matter to you? Because the most painful truth is also the most freeing. If someone can forget you just because you stopped chasing them, they were never holding your hand, you were holding your breath. So stop making it easy for them to take you for granted. Stop replying to breadcrumbs. Stop showing up when they only offer half presence. Every time you respond to their low-effort message, you teach them that they don't need to try harder, that your love is automatic, that your time is free. But love is not a subscription. You don't renew it without commitment. You don't offer it on discount to those who never paid in respect. And here's the part that will challenge you the most. You don't stop begging by becoming cold. You stop begging by becoming whole. Wholeness is what happens when you sit with your silence long enough to realize You never needed their reply to be complete. You only needed your own permission to stop waiting for one. Let your absence be the first thing they feel in the quiet. Let them reach out and meet nothing. Not punishment, just space. Space you no longer fill. Space they can't enter again. Because absence isn't emptiness. It's a boundary. It's a statement. It's a quiet, permanent reminder that you are not something they can pick up and put down again. You are not a bookmark in their unfinished chapter. You are a story that turned its final page without a sound. And when they finally realize you're not just being silent, you're actually gone, that's when they'll feel it. Not because you told them, not because you made them, but because you left nothing for them to hold on to. Say it with me, not out of defiance, but out of quiet truth. I no longer explain what should have been felt. I no longer beg to be seen. My absence is not a threat, it's a promise that I have returned to myself. Part 3. The silent shift that breaks them. You don't break them by raising your voice. You break them by removing the only mirror where they once saw themselves matter. Let me tell you something that the world rarely teaches. Power isn't loud. It doesn't yell. It doesn't chase. It doesn't explain. It simply leaves, and leaves quietly. That's what they never expected from you. They expected emotion. They expected resistance. They expected the final act of desperation. They were ready for your fire, but they were never ready for your silence. Because silence doesn't give them closure. It doesn't offer a final scene. It doesn't tell them what role they played. It simply ends the story mid-sentence, without applause, without credits, without farewell. That's what breaks them. They don't spiral when you scream. They spiral when you stop speaking. They panic not when you block them, but when they can no longer read your emotional temperature. Because up until now you were predictable. You were the one who stayed longer than you should have, the one who forgave without being asked, the one who tried to understand people who never gave you clarity. You thought that if you were kind enough, patient enough, soft enough, they would change. But they didn't change, because they never thought you'd leave. And when you finally do, without anger, without a dramatic exit, you create something they can't process. You become a mystery. You see, people can process conflict. They can defend against an argument. They can label your rage, mock your sadness, minimize your truth. But silence leaves them alone with themselves, with their thoughts, with the echo of their own choices. That's when regret begins to form, not in the moment you leave, but in the moments that follow, when you no longer return. And here's the beauty of it. You don't have to slam a door. You don't have to write a final paragraph. You don't have to declare anything. You just stop being available. Stop explaining. Stop hoping they'll get it. You withdraw your presence like the sun slipping behind the mountains. Inevitable, irreversible, majestic. And they feel the cold that follows. They don't know if you're hurting. They don't know if you've moved on. They don't know if they ever really mattered to you at all. And that question, did I ever mean something to someone who no longer acknowledges me at all? That is what eats them alive. It's not vindictive. It's not malicious. It's consequence. Because when someone takes you for granted, they don't expect to lose you quietly. They expect a fight. They expect to be begged. They expect drama because that gives them control. So when you take all of that away and replace it with pure, unshakable distance, they lose more than your voice. They lose their sense of control. It's like a puppet master tugging on strings that no longer exist. And the more they pull, the more they realize the show is over. You're not the same person who had sent that message. You're not the same person who would have asked, did I do something wrong? You're not even angry. You've just outgrown the need to be understood by someone who only ever valued your reaction. That is the shift. That is the moment the power returns to you. Not when they apologize, not when they chase, but when you no longer need either. From this moment on, no more rehearsed conversations in your head. No more scrolling through old messages. No more wondering if they noticed you're gone. Let your absence be a language they don't speak. Let your silence be a boundary they cannot cross. Let your life continue softly, steadily, powerfully, without them. Because nothing disarms a person more than realizing you're not angry, you're just done, and when they finally come to that realization, you'll already be too far ahead to hear them call your name. Say it softly, say it clearly, say it as a vow to your own peace. I no longer need to be understood by those who chose to misunderstand me. I no longer play a part in stories that don't honor my presence. My silence is not emptiness, it is closure, reborn as clarity. Part 4. Reverse the power dynamic. The moment they can no longer predict you is the moment you take your power back. Let's talk about control, not the kind that screams or demands, not overt manipulation, but the subtle control that slips between the lines of a half-hearted text, the control wrapped in a breadcrumb, the control that comes from knowing they still have access to you, even just a little. That's what they've had all along. They knew they could be distant and you'd lean in. They knew they could ignore you for days and you'd still reply. They knew that even if they disappeared, all it took was a 2-word message. Hey, you up? And the door would open again. That's not love. That's not connection. That's a power dynamic. And you were on the losing end of it. But here's the shift. People don't value what they believe is always available. They don't fear losing what they think they own. You were consistent. You were loyal. You were emotionally accessible. And instead of appreciating that, they banked on it. They assumed it would never change. Because you were easy to reach emotionally, digitally, spiritually, and that made them feel safe. Not safe in love, safe in control. But one day something inside you clicked, not with rage, not with drama, but with clarity. And that's when everything began to shift. You stopped checking their stories, stopped analyzing their silences, stopped decoding their inconsistency like it was sacred scripture. You stopped showing up with explanations for your worth. You stepped back, and that silence, that quiet withdrawal from the performance, was the most unexpected move of all. Suddenly they couldn't read you. They didn't know if you were angry or healed, didn't know if you'd moved on, or if you simply no longer cared. They couldn't place you emotionally, and that unsettled them, because control only works when it's predictable. So what do? They test the line. They send that familiar message. They post something they know would have gotten your attention in the past. They try to see if the lever still works if they pull, "Will you dance?" And when nothing comes back, no reply, no reaction, no emotional confirmation that they still matter. That's when the panic begins. Because here's the truth. They're not chasing you because they miss your heart. They're chasing you because they miss the control they had over it. You were the source of a feeling they could summon at will. Now, that power is gone, not taken from them, reclaimed by you. And this is the part where many people fall. Because the moment they reach out again, the old wound lights up. You feel a flicker of validation. They still think of me. You wonder, maybe now they understand. Maybe this is real. But it's not real. It's familiar. What they want isn't you. It's the feeling of knowing they still influence you. So if you respond even a little, you reset the dynamic. You slip quietly back into the role they once scripted for you. The one where you chase, the one where you explain, the one where your silence has a hidden message just waiting to be cracked. But this time you don't respond. Not because you're playing hard to get, because you're no longer available to be misunderstood. You're not ignoring them to punish them. You're simply not engaging. You're not playing. You've taken the stage lights down, walked off set and left the theater altogether. Because power doesn't come from control. It comes from freedom. And you are now free. Free from their confusion. Free from the push and pull. Free from seeking validation in someone who only ever offered control, dressed as affection. This is the reversal. You don't take back power by becoming who they were. You take it back by becoming who you were always meant to be. Whole, rooted, unshakable. Say it with me, not as resistance, but as return. I no longer dance when they pull the strings. I am not reactive. I am sovereign. I am no longer in their control. Part 5. Don't block. make them watch. You don't punish them by disappearing. You break the cycle by existing beyond their reach, visible, radiant, and untouchable. Let's talk about something most people get wrong. Blocking feels powerful. It feels like closure. It feels like drawing a line. And sometimes, yes, it's necessary for your safety, your sanity, your sacred space. But other times, blocking is just another way of saying, I'm still reacting to you. It says, I saw your post. I read your message. I felt something, and I needed to do something to make it stop. It's a response, a loud one. And here's the truth. People expect that. They expect your reaction. They expect you to lash out, cut off, disappear, slam the digital door shut with a satisfying click, because that gives them certainty. They can walk away thinking, oh, they're mad, they're hurt. They'll come back when they calm down. There's no real consequence in being blocked, only confirmation. But what if you didn't block them? What if, instead, you simply became someone they could never reach again? Not because you hid, but because you outgrew the space where they once lived? That's not blocking. That's ascending, and that's what they'll never expect. You're still there. They can still see you, but they don't know how to reach you anymore. The door looks the same, but it's locked. The windows glow, but they're tinted. You're smiling in the light, but the warmth isn't theirs anymore. That's the kind of heartbreak they never saw coming, because when you block them, they know exactly where you stand. But when you don't, and instead you flourish where they can't follow, they feel the loss deeper, not as rejection, but as displacement. They used to be the one you turned to. Now they're just another follower, another silent observer. They don't know who you are becoming, and they know deep down they're no longer part of the story. Let them watch. Let them scroll. Let them see the version of you that no longer apologizes for growing in directions they can't recognize. This is not about revenge. It's not about pettiness. It's about becoming so aligned with your peace that their chaos no longer touches you. You are not blocking them because of what they did. You are blessing yourself by choosing not to engage. And that, my friend, is what shatters people. Not being erased, but being excluded from your future while still being able to see it unfold. Every laugh they witness without context, every smile that no longer involves them, every new chapter that doesn't even acknowledge the last, it all becomes a mirror, and in that mirror they see exactly what they lost, but with no way back in, because that's what true healing looks like, not vanishing, evolving beyond recognition. So don't delete, don't block, don't give them the gift of knowing exactly how you feel. Let them wonder. Let them refresh your page at midnight, hoping for a crack, a message, a clue. Let them scroll through your stories, trying to decode your new glow. Let them watch you move with grace they no longer receive. Not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you've stopped letting them have access to the parts of you they couldn't care for when it mattered. Because here's what they were never prepared for. You didn't leave in anger. You just stopped waiting to be seen. Say it with me, not with malice, but with sovereign clarity. I don't block. I don't chase. I let them watch me become unreachable. Part 6. Give them no closure, let it haunt them. You don't owe them the peace they never once tried to give you. Closure. Such a beautiful sounding word. We're told it brings healing, clarity, peace. That if we could just sit down and say everything we need to say, if we could explain, understand, cry it out, tie the ribbon, then we could move on. But here's the truth nobody really tells you. Closure is not something they give you, and it's not something you owe them. It's a conversation you have with yourself, long after they stopped listening. It's not a moment of mutual understanding. It's the moment you stop needing mutual anything. Let's go back. When they left or slowly withdrew or left emotionally long before they left physically, did they give you closure? Did they sit down and say, let me make sure you're okay. Let me help you understand why I pulled away. Let me honor what you gave me by ending this with truth. No. They left you in confusion, in the blur of mixed signals, unanswered texts, vague silence. They walked out like it was nothing, and left you trying to make sense of everything. And now that you're gone, now that you've gone quiet, now they're the one asking questions. They want a reason. They want to understand. They want closure, but not for your healing, for their convenience. Because here's what they really want. They want to walk away clean. They want your explanation to soothe their guilt. They want to hear you say, "It's okay, I understand," so they can carry on unburdened, unbothered, unchanged. But you don't owe them that comfort. Not anymore. Not after all the nights you sat, wondering what went wrong. Not after all the emotional labor you did alone. Not after all the versions of the final message you wrote and deleted. No, let them sit in the silence they once gave you, because they expect something. They expect one last paragraph. They expect one more signal that they still matter. And when you give them nothing, no explanation, no story, no exit speech, that's when the silence becomes unbearable. That's when they start replaying old conversations. That's when they go back and read between every line you ever sent. That's when the question, "Why did they stop?" becomes the echo they can't silence. They wanted a clean ending. You gave them an open wound, but not because you were cruel, because you were finally honest with yourself. They didn't earn the ending, so they don't deserve the explanation. The person who disappears without a word is rarely the one who walked away first. It's usually the one who stayed too long, who kept speaking into silence, who gave chance after chance, until they realized no one was listening. And so now your silence is not an act of war. It is a final act of self-respect. You don't owe them closure. You owe yourself freedom. Freedom from the loop. Freedom from the performance. Freedom from explaining your worth to someone who could not hold it when it was freely given. Because the most unforgettable people aren't the ones who left a mark. They're the ones who left a question. And that's what you are now. The unsolved story. The open book that slammed shut mid-chapter. The silence they can't decode. And it will follow them. Not in guilt, but in wonder. Because when something ends without a final scene, the mind cannot let go. Let them stay up at night, whispering to the ceiling. Why did they just stop? Let that be the lesson. Let your disappearance become the mirror they refused to face when you were still present. Say it with me, not out of spite, but as a calm, sacred truth. I owe no one an explanation, not because they don't deserve answers, but because I no longer need to ask the questions. Part 7. The power of unpredictability. When they can no longer predict your next move, they start fearing they never really knew you at all. We are creatures of pattern. We notice what repeats. We find comfort in what is familiar, and we take for granted what we assume will always be there. That's how they kept you. They learned your rhythm, the timing of your forgiveness, the script of your silence. They memorized how long it would take you to crack, to check in again, to soften, to reach out, even after they pulled away. To them, you were a song on loop, familiar, safe, predictable. Even your pain was part of the routine. They knew you'd get angry, sure, but not gone. They knew you'd fall silent, but not free. And then, one day, the music stopped. The pattern broke. The version of you they were sure they understood vanished, not dramatically, vanished, not publicly, but completely. And that silence, that pause in the pattern, that's what made them spiral. Because people aren't haunted by what they lost. They're haunted by what they can't read anymore. When you stop explaining, stop reacting, stop confirming their significance, you rob them of their favorite illusion, the belief that they still have access to your emotions. You become unpredictable, not because you're playing games, but because you finally stopped playing altogether. You stop showing up for their ego. You stop giving your energy to the dance. You walk off the stage mid-scene and let the curtain fall without applause, without explanation. And suddenly they're left wondering, are you hurt or healed? Are you waiting or gone? Do you still care? Or have you forgotten they ever existed? That not knowing, it breaks them, because until now, their power came from knowing exactly how to trigger you. A word, a message, a memory. But now, they try and there's no echo. No flinch, no shift, no sign, only the unfamiliar silence of someone who's moved beyond the reach of manipulation. And here's what makes this truly powerful. You're not faking indifference. You've become it, not because you stopped feeling, but because you stopped performing your feelings for people who only valued the reaction, not the reality. And that's the secret to real unpredictability. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being free, when your peace is no longer tied to their attention, when your joy no longer depends on their recognition, when your validation doesn't rise and fall with their inconsistency. You become unreadable, not because you're hiding, but because you are finally centered in something they don't control anymore. Let them refresh your page. Let them post and wonder if you've seen it. Let them stalk your silence, hoping it holds a message. But don't give them one, because your unpredictability is not an act of cruelty. It's a declaration of sovereignty. You're no longer an open book. You are a locked journal in a language they never cared to learn when they had the chance. And that is what breaks the illusion, because they don't miss the story. They miss being able to rewrite it. But now the story continues without them, and they have no idea what chapter you're on, no idea who you're becoming, no idea what your silence means anymore. That mystery, it will stay with them far longer than any message you could have written. Say it with me quietly, with certainty. I am no longer predictable. I am not a role in someone else's drama. I am the unknown they cannot follow. Part 8. Make them feel re-recognizable. They thought they were rare, until you stopped treating them like they were. Let's begin with something most people never see coming. They didn't fear losing you. They feared becoming ordinary in your eyes. When someone believes they're irreplaceable in your life, they stop trying. They stop listening. They stop showing up fully, because deep down, they've convinced themselves, no one else will ever make them feel this way. No one else will ever take my place. And if we're being honest, maybe you believed it too. Maybe you placed them on a pedestal they never earned. Maybe you mistook chaos for chemistry. Maybe you thought pain was a sign of depth, and inconsistency was just a complicated kind of love. So you tolerated the bare minimum. You kept the door open. You forgave what should have been a goodbye. You made excuses for their absence and gave meaning to their silence. And they saw that. They saw how far you were willing to bend, how much you were willing to give without being asked. And so they stopped giving. Why should they have tried harder when your presence was unconditional? But here's what they never expected, that one day you would simply stop. Not dramatically, not spitefully, just finally. You stopped explaining. You stopped waiting. You stopped needing them to be more than they were ever willing to be. And in that stillness, everything shifted. Because now they're watching a version of you that no longer revolves around them. You're no longer checking your phone. You're no longer deciphering their mixed signals. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself. And that's what haunts them. Not your absence, but your evolution. They were prepared for your heartbreak. They weren't prepared for your peace. They were ready for your tears. They weren't ready for your glow. They expected to be unforgettable. But now they're just background noise in a life that's moving forward without them. And here's the part that hits the deepest. You didn't replace them with another person. You replaced them with your own power, with your freedom, with your wholeness. You no longer walk around with an open wound, hoping they'll come back and apologize for causing it. You've healed it yourself, and that kind of healing, that kind of peace, it makes you irreplaceable. Now they look at you and see someone they don't recognize. Someone who's no longer impressed by their games. Someone who no longer mistakes breadcrumbs for a feast. You've become someone who laughs louder, sleeps deeper, and loves themselves harder. And here's the beautiful irony. You were always the rare one. They were just too blind to see it when you were standing still. Now that you're in motion, growing, glowing, untouchable, they're finally starting to understand. But it's too late, because being irreplaceable doesn't mean they can't find someone else. It means that no matter who they find, it won't be you. No one will love them the way you did. No one will forgive like you forgave. No one will hold space for them the way you did, so patiently, so vulnerably. And one day, they'll find someone new, someone easier maybe, but they'll realize that easy doesn't mean meaningful. And in the quiet moments, they'll remember you, but you'll be far ahead, not out of reach, out of resonance, because your heart now beats on a different frequency, one that no longer vibrates to the memory of someone who couldn't recognize you while you were still within reach. Say it with me. No arrogance, just clarity. They were never the rare one. I was. And now they'll spend the rest of their life trying to find what they let slip away. The final move isn't revenge, it's silence, it's distance, it's peace. And now you know. You don't block them. You don't beg them. You don't chase them. You don't sit by the phone hoping they'll finally understand what they walked away from. You don't write the paragraph they never deserved. You don't try to make your absence poetic or your silence mysterious. You simply go quietly, completely, and never look back, because that's what they never expected. They thought you'd need closure. They thought you'd fight harder. They thought you'd fall apart without them. But instead you rose. Not to prove them wrong, but because you finally remembered who you were before they made you forget. And now, you no longer play the game. You no longer keep the door cracked open, just in case they come back. You don't wait for apologies. You don't measure your healing by their awareness of your worth. Your healing is not for them to witness. It's for you to live. And that's the quiet power they will never recover from. Because, while they expected to be mourned, you became someone they no longer recognize, someone whose peace no longer includes them, someone whose name now echoes with a kind of freedom they can't imitate. And maybe one day they'll realize. Maybe one day time will wrap its quiet hands around their pride and whisper, "You had something rare, and you let it slip." But by then you won't care. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you no longer feel the need to be felt by them. And that, right there, is your real closure. You didn't need to be chosen. You needed to choose yourself. You didn't need the ending to be fair. You just needed it to be final. So let them wonder. Let time do what your words couldn't. Let their memory of you become a mirror they can't look away from, a story they'll never get the last page of. And you walked forward, not faster, not louder, just lighter, because real power doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being whole. Say this not for them to hear, but for your soul to know. I no longer explain what I've already outgrown. And I don't chase what couldn't see me. I don't wait for the past to apologize. I walk, I rise, I begin again. In silence, in strength, in peace. This is your time now, not to prove anything, but to build everything they never thought you could without them. Welcome to the next chapter, unwritten, untouched, unapologetically yours.